Hello and welcome to another episode on the Let's Talk series. This one, very contentious one, RPG level scaling. So we'll have a chat about that today. If you've not seen these before, then basically these are just little improvised chats that we have on the channel. That run sort of next to the various RPG Let's Plays that we do, where we just try and pick apart some of the issues. There's a little bit of a framework to it. As you can see, we use this very janky Google Sheet setup because that's the level of professionalism we're talking about. But yeah, every time we do them, I think they're the ones that the people tend to enjoy the most. So let's do this one. Level scaling. So here we are talking about how different RPGs handle the sort of enemy level management. We normally start off with some core concepts. It's pretty brief this time around. When we talk about the scaling systems, I find that there's different people use the terms sort of interchangeably. So for reference, when I say level scaling, I am saying that the enemies scale to the player character's level. Whereas area scaling, the enemies scale to the various area that you're in. If you're in I don't know, like the gap before Sector 6 slums, then you will encounter thieves there. If you are, I don't know, in I don't think of any enemies. If you're in the marshes, you'll encounter the Midgard Zol. I mean, it basically is just it's enemy, they're area dependent. The other two concepts, and again not terribly challenging concepts to this, but they really affect what we're going to discuss, is the linearity of your game. So the extent to which you can go to different areas from the back. Can you go to the end game areas is a really crucial part of this. Or is there a sort of lock between things? When we're looking at this in the context of scaling, it's not about the story, it's about the progression through the game, your area progression. So even if I'm trying to think of a sort of example, like I would say Baldur's Gate 3 is, it's quite open and non-linear in terms of its story, but its area progression is, it's not totally linear by any stretch, but it's more linear than I guess the story would be. And then the final thing here, and it will again crop up later, is the leveling system width. And what I mean by this basically is whether or not there is a wide range of player character levels that will affect how difficult various parts of the game or various challenges will be. In Baldur's Gate 1, before, if you play without the expansion, I think the level cap ends up for most classes being around like level 6 or 7. Whereas obviously in Final Fantasy VII it's 99, and then you've got all the extra bits on top of that. So Final Fantasy VII has got a much wider leveling system width, and that will again play in to this. So what we normally do with these, and no exception here, we bring up our beloved, or my beloved, your much maligned tier listing. That was just the games. It's a bit outdated. There's been a few additions since then, but I'm still using the old graphic. But it's basically to give you an idea of which RPGs I think are the best and which ones we can learn most from in that sense. I'm not going to keep this. If you want to have a look at it, then as ever you can go back. We've got a small selection of those games, and I just wanted to have a look at them overall and just sort of talk about firstly what the games are doing, just so we've got an idea, and then we'll kind of focus down on one or two more in a bit more detail. I've left this column here, what's the feel? I don't know if we'll necessarily phrase it like that, but we'll see. So yeah, Final Fantasy VII, in keeping with most JRPGs, most Final Fantasies in the general formula, it uses hard area-based scaling. So it's not really an open world. I mean, we've got that only mildly. I'm going to put not really. We were talking about that in a slightly different sense on the other video, which I just sort of carried on from. It's got a wide level and width, and there is one, to the best of my recollection, one piece of level scaling in the entire game. It's on the final boss, and it just means that that boss, if you go in at a high level, is still quite challenging relative to everything in Final Fantasy VII, because it's, generally speaking, not that difficult a game. When we speak of Final Fantasy VII, and this will be the default for most of the times, unless it is specifically mentioned, we are talking about the original. That is the PlayStation original. Obviously, remake and rebirth are not something that we cover here. Baldur's Gate 2. So Baldur's Gate 2 is a really interesting one, because when I was a backer for the Pillars of Eternity, that was kickstarted, that game, and I was part of the folks who paid money in advance to back it and get it going, and I was quite active on those forums, and we were discussing whether or not the Pillars should have level scaling, and I said no, it should just be hard area scaling like in Baldur's Gate 2. And somebody very kindly and gently just sort of raised their hand and said, you do realise that Baldur's Gate 2 has got level scaling? And it does. And I think that's going to be on our list, if I recall correctly. Yes, it's there. So we'll discuss that in a bit more detail. But it's got mixed area and level scaling. We'll come back to that a bit. Fallout 2, again, almost entirely area-based. There are one or two things in the caves, the robbers and some of the other enemies that you find in there will level scale, but the vast majority of it is about where you go, not what. Baldur's Gate 1 is entirely area-based, but it's also the first of these you'll see where the width starts to become a bit more narrow. Same with Bloodlines. That again, it's just based on the area, to the best of my recollection. Fire Emblem Three Houses, which we are. When will this come out? We might have just finished that playthrough. But that is, again, that's area-based. Here feels a little bit misleading because it's not so much like it does it area-based. It's more sort of chapter-based. But nevertheless, it's not the enemies responding to your character levels or your average level or whatever. It is about where you are in terms of how far you've progressed through the game. Similarly, Final Fantasy X, yeah, I mean that's again much like 7, but even more so. Persona 4 is an interesting one, and I think I've picked this as one of our other ones to look at. Because Persona 4, as I understand it, it has area scaling, but the enemies within each area will scale up to a point to your level. So, like, enemies will only ever get so hard, depending on how, if you go in at a low level, it sort of like caps it out. And equally, if you go in at very high level, it will cap out the sort of disparity of you to them. Now, there's a lot of things going on with Persona 4's sort of systems generally. So it's arguably, it's not just wide in terms of the physical number of levels each character and each persona has, but it's also wide in that there's quite a lot of disparity in terms of a fight that goes well and a fight that goes badly. But it is there. Baldur's Gate 3, to the best of my recollection, no, I think that's all area based. Might and Magic 7, which we did relatively recently, certainly is. And then Morrowind, Morrowind is it has enemies that are locked to areas, and I think almost anything on the main quest is locked to those areas. But many of the areas where you're fighting the particularly the Daedra, as I recall, will hard scale to your level. So if you go there, I can't remember the names of these things, it's been nearly 25 years since I played it, but like if you go at like level 50, you end up fighting Golden Saints, but if you go in level 5, then you just fight like the little things. So it definitely has that there, but it is restricted to a few areas. Dragon Age Origins and Final Fantasy 7 use hard level scaling, and Wizardry 8 uses level scale. There are the bosses in Final Fantasy 8 don't, and there is a little bit of some area stuff, like some of the optional fights, and I suppose you could argue that the final push in Dragon Age Origins is well, you would argue it is just area scaled in that regard. What's going on here? Well, if we ignore this one, we will see that the ones that are most clearly level scaling are right down at the bottom, and the next one up in the best of the ones, I suppose, for this in D is mixed, and we're seeing mostly an area based approach to things. And there's a couple of reasons, like both, like from sort of both sides of like that, I guess the causality here. Like on one hand, a lot of games use area system based systems because that's just kind of easier to do. That's, you know, we'll come again more detail on that in a sec. So fewer games are using hard level scaling, but also level scaling tends not to be a very popular thing, and it doesn't surprise me in the slightest that the table looks like this, where I feel like Baldur's Gate 2 is the anomaly here. Let's have a look at some games specifically. So, Final Fantasy VII, again, with this, that's a very linear game in terms of like the area progression, with a wide leveling width. When you're making a game as linear as Final Fantasy VII, you're almost incentivized, well, you are incentivized, I think, to make that an area-based scaling. In fact, let's literally put it in. to pull the player along through the narrative. You're looking at story-based games, and you're looking at this, what is basically the core simple RPG system, that in a level-based game, if you are not good enough to proceed through strategy/tactics, you should always be able to grind. And this is something, I mean, we'll see it in a lot of these games. That's a really, really just, it's a good loop. The entire genre owes a lot to that logic, that if you are stuck, if you are finding the game too hard, you should be able to make it easier by picking up some levels, and you should be able to pick up those levels from fights that are relatively easy to get to. You know, like ideally, most of the time, the fights in the area just before you get stuck should be enough to give you the edge on the area where you are stuck. And it really is. It's a core part of the. I think of the genre. I think that whenever you're doing that, or rather, whenever you're doing anything that isn't that, you should be really, really asking yourself, okay, why? Why are we doing that? And a lot of the videos we've talked about before, on particularly the one on leveling systems, that we mentioned this, that is a core part of it. But it's also, again, if you've got that sort of linear narrative, then it pulls things along a lot easier if you are outgrowing the areas that you are in, if there is reason to do that. One of the reasons I pick Final Fantasy VII, I almost always pick Final Fantasy VII to look at, because I think it's the best example of the kind of game it is, if that makes sense. That if you are talking about linear JRPGs, I think that's the daddy. There's lots of other ones I very much enjoy, but if you're talking a character-driven narrative, and that's a lot of RPGs, that's the one that's stuck in people's mind. Again, this is talking about the PlayStation original rather than anything that's come after. Moving to Baldur's Gate 2, and this one, again, as I mentioned, I was under the impression, let's put it in, Stupid Jar was under the impression it had area scaled. In fact, it level scales quite a lot. What it means in Baldur's Gate 2 is that, like, a lot of the enemies are localized to the area that they're in. So if you're in, I don't know, like the vampire catacombs or whatever, you're going to be fighting vampires. You're never going to find dragons in the vampire catacombs. It's vampires, it's undead, But if you come in at a much higher level, it will up the tiers of the encounters it throws at you, and not all of them. Some of them will just be exactly as they are, but then there'll be one or two that are scaled. And it does it really, really well. I'm putting stupid jar there because, like, why not? I'm happy to laugh there. But in actual fact, I don't think I was stupid. I think that Baldur's Gate 2 just gets this really right. So it isn't immediately obvious, the level scales. Can I actually just bring these? Actually, I'll do that. Bring these down a touch, because there's probably going to be a bit to talk about here. Yeah. Why is that? Well, I guess the other thing, just to isn't it level scales, increases certain mob encounters by tiers according to level. So what you might have here is you might, for example, if you go to one of the undead areas, and if you go there and your average party level is level 9, you will fight maybe a mummy and a couple of skeletons. But if you go there at level 17, you'll fight a lich with several mummies and probably lots of skeletons as well. And the lots of skeletons as well is really, and like the fact that it doesn't do it for all these fights. So like an area might contain I'll say 5 times area scale encounters and 3 times level scaled area encounters. Lots of trash mobs, and this is the root of the success for me with Baldur's Gate 2. We talked about on the leveling systems video that you can design your game one of two ways. Well, there's one of two, but there's one of two philosophies, and how far you go one way or another on the spectrum it is your choice. But you can either say, I'm going to create a load of challenges, a load of dungeons, and then I'm going to give the player a leveling up system to help them get through those. And I don't think that that's anywhere near as good as building a leveling up system and then designing a load of levels that can showcase the player's power and progression. I think that this is a fundamental design philosophy of trying to not be in an adversarial relationship with the player. That's not the same as being easy. You can make... We don't cover, especially if you're new, we don't cover skill-based games on here. Try and ignore the fact that Bloodlines is on there, because that is blatantly skill-based. But we don't generally cover it, so we don't cover the Souls-likes. But the Souls-likes are games that are incredibly challenging and tough, but I don't think they are... they don't feel adversarial. It's a hard one, or adversarial in their design. Why am I banging on about this? in terms of Baldur's Gate 2, well, what you want with these encounters is to be able to show how powerful you are. And a really easy way to do that is to include lots of trash mobs, lots of weaker fights in the thing. Like, I think in one of the levels, if you go there at level 7, there'll be like 5 orcs, and if you go at level like 14 or whatever, then suddenly there's like 15 orcs and 2 orc shaman and a load of other things as well. But you just, because of the nature of that fight, you just throw a fireball in, or a cloud kill, and they just drop instantly. And there's a massive sense there of power, which is the feeling you most likely want to impart on your player if you are thinking about the design in as a collaborative, but in a non-adversarial way. Obviously, not every fight is like that, and some of the fights in here are designed to provide challenge and to keep the areas interesting. I think of those lich fights that might otherwise be mummies, it's like, yeah, that makes it difficult. Of course, not everything will scale, and there's a sense that the areas still have their identity, which is also crucial. But I think if you're doing it, if you're using that sort of multiple trash mob system, you really do get the best of both worlds, in that the areas don't feel scaled. And most of the time, and then we'll come on to this when we talk about fundamental problems in a second, but most of the time I think the issue that players have with level scaling, as they perceive it, is that they don't feel like they're getting the benefit from leveling up. And if you don't feel that you're getting the benefit from it, and you're in an RPG, it's just not a good sign. I think we'll leave that there on that. Can I copy you to there? So Persona 4. Now Persona is an odd one here. I've played Persona 3, 4 and 5. Persona 4, to my mind, is the best of those. Long tail. Cut short, I think 3 lacks polish, and I think 5 is just far too slow paced for the amount of depth the game has. I've said they're linear but not. What I mean by this is the game is linear in the sense that each dungeon that you're working through is unlocked with each sort of progression of the story. So in a sense you have a kind of like Final Fantasy style sequential levels that you can't get to until you've met the requirements. Where it becomes a little less linear with the Persona games is that you have this time management thing going on, where you can get into situations, and it happened to me with Persona 3 most notably. I got myself into a real sticky spot because I hadn't realised, because I had no indicator, and it is a problem that the Persona games have. I didn't realise that I was way under-leveled for the quest I was in, and I ended up against a boss that was just really, really far above me. It was a very, very difficult fight to get through because there wasn't the indicator. Now, there's a slight problem in the Persona game's design, because that will happen to you once, and then you'll never let it happen to you again. And from that point, in every single Persona game, I've played, all the rest of 3, all of 4, everywhere I got up to in 5, I was over leveled because I didn't want to be in that situation again. I didn't have a clue otherwise. But the point is that in the design of what you have there, there's a bit more scope for level disparity to happen. I'll put it at the start of that, actually. Profession. Yeah, so what Persona 4 does, I think I'm right in saying that you've got sort of a competing level system. I always forget the phrase I'm after. There's a specific D&D term, but like, it's about the differential between the enemy's level and your level. Like, if you are 5 levels higher than the enemy, then you will have a I don't know, like a 15% increase to the damage that you do, and a 15% decrease the damage that they do to you. And it basically affects the numbers like that. It's like opposing. We would say opposing rolls, wouldn't we? Yeah. It's that they are opposing levels, and the differential is what matters. But what happens with that is it caps out. I think it caps out at 50%. So you will do, if you're the whatever the minimum, the maximum gap between you and the enemy, if they are, I don't know, 20 levels higher than you, then that will mean they do, on top of their normal damage is increased by 50%, and the damage you do to them is decreased by 50%. And I think with that, beyond that, you still have the area, like the base damage of the enemies is local to the area, but I suppose the function of the system is to make it so that well, first off, let's just actually write in. Can we do? Ooh, that's not what I want. We're going to get functions if I do it like this, aren't we? Right. Okay. What if I do it here? Yeah. So the idea may be to maybe amplify the level effects, but cap these so it is always doable. To be honest with you, with Persona, it's a with Persona 4, it isn't something that, I mean, I guess it, like in Baldur's Gate, it does manage to sort of hide away these systems, but it because until you know it's there, it's hard to know exactly how that's working. Which is good, because then you don't have the problem of the player not feeling a sense of progression. They're very much feeling a sense of progression. The question I would ask with this is whether or not that cap is actually achieving much for the effort that's going in. That, to me, if I think about my own how I did program my games, I would do a system like that, either because I wanted to have an easy way to implement a difficulty setting system. If I wanted to change and shift that number up and down, based on something, you'd have like a constant that you could set the level disparity threshold to be at, which would just make for very easy difficulty management. Well, probably not terribly good difficulty management, but that. Or I would do that if I've designed the system and retrospectively I'm like, yeah, this isn't feeling quite as I envisaged it from the numbers on paper. I think we need to reel this in a little bit. That's the sort of system that I would put in after the fact, rather than deliberately. But yeah, let's do Fallout. Let's do Fallout 2. So we've got a wide open system allowing us to go anywhere. Along with a fairly wide leveling width. As a consequence, the areas of the game can run the difficulty as required. I remember playing. There was another game like this. I can't remember. It was probably about like a 1991 PC game. I can't remember what the hell it was called. And post in the comments, by the way, if I tell you this and you're like, I know that game, it was this. And it was like Fallout 2 in the sense that it had an open system. You could go more or less anywhere, go and do whatever area you wanted to go in. But it scaled, and by the end of the game, all you were fighting was golden dragons. And it you went to the start of town, came outside, and oh good, it's another golden dragon. And that lead, first off, you've got a tremendous loss of flavour to the areas with that. Your mobs are is a core part of your level design, and I don't mean of your area design. Is that clear? I want you to know what I mean. When we sort of think about not levels like level 1, character levels, but levels like stages in Mario, your stage design is going to be heavily your theme is going to be set by the enemies that you encounter. And we've already mentioned that on several occasions, some of the bits of Final Fantasy VII, particularly these, some of these undead areas and so on, dragon fights or whatever in Baldur's Gate 2. And I think having something like that in an open game, it's just really that's the reason why it's open, isn't it? So that there's difference, so that you can feel that difference. The point is, if you've got a very open game, I think you're working against yourself if you're trying to use level scaling on that, because level scaling is something that's sort of inherently narrow. There. So yeah, these are the considerations really for this. So I guess first off, like, why is it hated? To me, oh, by the way, why is it hated? These are all referring to level scaling, and if we start needing to refer to area scaling, then we'll talk about that specifically in the text. Of progression. Yeah, I think this sense, the sense that the level up is meaningless if everything scales, I find that I feel that hard with these two, Dragon Age Origins and Final Fantasy VII. I know that Final Fantasy VII has got it's got things going on with the junction system. And it's more about that junction system than it is the level system. And the junction system, famously, is incredibly breakable. I've got problems with the junction system as well, and perhaps more precisely the draw mechanic. I think is really bad, but the point is that with the level ups with this, and particularly with Dragon Age Origins, when your character levels up on some level, that should be a feel-good thing. That is a player reward. That is there every time the player gets a level up. That's your primary reward system in an RPG. And I know you might look at some of these things and say, well, isn't the exploration of finding a new area in Fallout 2 more of a reward? Isn't finding some exposition about a character's motivation and their relationship with the plot in Final Fantasy VII more of a reward? But these are sort of, they're slower burn rewards, and you keep the treadmill running with lots of little rewards, lots of, being really basic about it, we'll say it, keeping those dopamine hits going. And a ding should be a dopamine hit. And when you level Dragon Age Origins, ding, you've leveled up, it's like, well, it didn't really mean anything, does it? And then you've shot yourself in the foot with that. So I think I can really see why people don't like it. But with that said, why does it help? Well, firstly, it keeps a sense of challenge through a game. If we think about in our case studies, yeah, if the final boss, if you go into that final boss at level 99, and so some people will be going in at level 40, so it has to be doable for the level 40s, but you want there to be a certain amount of challenge, even in an easy game, to the final boss, or at least a certain sense of scope. Right, sorry, 2 secs. Okay, not quite sure what that was about. In Baldur's Gate 2, those dungeons, as you progress, are made more interesting by virtue of the fact that they are, you're not breezing through them, or at least you're not breezing through all of it. And similarly with, even Persona 4, there's, I guess that you could just, were it not for, well, let's just leave Persona 4, which is probably the best thing for most folks to do. So yeah, it keeps a sense of challenge there. I think the other thing is it does, if we think about the Baldur's Gate 2 example particularly, it provides a system for tailoring encounters to make them interesting, and it does. So again, if we go back to that orc example, of the many orcs that you can still just wipe out with the fireball, but which may not sound terribly interesting, but it's a big sense of power. It gives something to the player in that regard. If we didn't have that, then you probably wouldn't use the fireball. You wouldn't have the spectacular sense of that. I think the other thing to say is it can, italicize that please, if you're having trouble balancing areas, then you can use this as a kind of get out of jail free card. I think it's a dangerous crux, but it's there. The core RPG loop, we talked about it earlier. Let's remind ourselves. If you are ever stuck, you should be able to grind your way out of trouble. And it's just like the most basic piece of like so you can always area scale if you can do this. Now some games on the list, and again I never like to spend too much time on it because I love Bloodlines and I always want it to get the recognition it deserves, but it's the odd one out here. It's the most skill based of the system. When you are more skill based, you can afford to avoid that loop. You can afford to say no to the grind, which it does. It's got a really cool leveling up system. Bloodlines a lot of time for it. But yeah, we talk about obfuscation. The player doesn't need to know that level scaling is hyphenated. Yeah. So if we think about with this, the likes of Baldur's Gate 2, to an extent, Persona 4. I know it's an uncomfortable one, but like that's there. I think most of those, if we go back through to this, Fallout 2. I think it takes a little bit of work. And then the final sort of point in question with this is like, what's the path of least resistance to success? You know, you want to. Sometimes you have to be realistic, I guess, about the systems. Like. Well, can't tell. The point with this is not to say, so just use level scaling. When I think about the design for the systems that these bottom three games use, like I just don't think they're successful. It's fun, by the way. Was that really a D? I'm pretty sure I had that lower than D. Come to think of it. Right, hold on. Hold on 1 minute. I want to check this out. Right. Where's it gone? Apologies. I don't think this is the case. It's not covered. It's not covering your screen. Yes. You, sir, are in that tier. Any other outliers here? Immediately leaping out. Apologies if you've noticed any discrepancies again. Do give me a shout in the comments. Yeah, it's not great, really, is it? Like, so. But I guess you know, if you can think about like what is the value added by scaling, how would a tiered approach work? So thinking about something again like Baldur's Gate 2, where you've got these different tiers of encounters, which gives it a bit of a mix and but also a feel. Let's put this leveling up becomes meaningless. The other thing is areas lose some of their definition. Yeah. I guess let me see. I guess those are kind of the main points with this that I really wanted to cover. I think we're going to see that there aren't too many games that we are covering on the channel or have covered on the channel that do use the heavy level scaling, but Dragon Age Origins, if you've seen that playthrough, yeah, that becomes. I mean, Dragon Age Origins, it's got problems with its systems all over. Like it, I think that's really a thing. Maybe as well with the obfuscation, it's like perhaps worth bearing in mind that let's bring that down. Oop. Yeah. How visible are your numbers and metrics? Like, if you've got something like a Final Fantasy VII, and you've got your, I don't know, Hard Edge, there's the sword for Cloud that he can get. I think either in Junon or possibly just in the upper floors of the Shinra building if you steal it. Hard Edge has a rating of like 32 or whatever, and you're hitting enemies for, I don't know, like 600 points of damage. Do you really know what's leading to that 600? You can see that Hard Edge is doing more damage than the Buster Sword, which you had previously, so you can see the difference, but can you really see the numbers? Because the more you can see the numbers, the more things should become more apparent. Like obviously with Baldur's Gate 2 and Fallout to a slightly less degree, but nevertheless still the case, you can see the dice there. You can see what the rolls are. Obviously, like Baldur's Gate is using D&D, so it's using a strictly dice-based system, whereas Fallout is more a calculation-based system, but you can still see the details. So potentially, you have to sort of bear that in mind if you're going to try and hide it. That said, for all the logic of that statement, Baldur's Gate 2 uses those numbers and dice and very successfully hides it, and Dragon Age Origins doesn't use that system at all. It just has random integers that are meaningless, and yet you can still feel it. So it also as well with this, and I guess this is perhaps one of the other really like critical parts of this. Yeah, in fact, maybe we need to, I don't know, list it as that. Can I squeeze this in somewhere? I think I'm just going to have to put it down the bottom in one long line. Sorry, this is going to get even uglier, folks. Go to here, please. Yeah. Yeah. What's your monster encounter design like, just generally? Does it feel? Have you managed to create a system where the various fights feel different, or is it all pretty amorphous? Because again, I mean, like, part of the problem I think that Dragon Age suffers from a lot is that, like, most of the fights are just, they're not really, it's just endless, meaningless darkspawn. You know. So I think, you know, if you've got variance in the encounters, and this is really when we talk about the tier list, like, you know, you ignore everything else that's here, just thinking about that. I think there's some good encounter design in Fallout 2. I actually think there's some pretty good, to say it's quite an easy game, pretty good encounter design in Final Fantasy 7. But Baldur's Gate 2 is just great for it. Like, it I think of all the games on this list, I think it is the one whose encounters feel the most varied and impactful. And obviously, you know, it's got, you know, God knows how many years of Dungeons and Dragons to lean on for that. But you can't. You still have to give them their credit for implementing it from a development point of view. Fighting the trolls is its own specific problem. Fighting vampires is its own very specific problem. It's an horrendous problem, but it is a problem. You know, before you start getting into things like Illithids or Beholders or whatever, these are big, impactful enemies. Baldur's Gate 2 does phenomenally with that. Sometimes I think, like, I mean, this channel originally came into being because it was I was basically a friend of mine whose handle is Substandard Michael. He was doing a channel, and where he was playing games he'd never played before, and he was doing the Baldur's Gate series, and he enjoyed Baldur's Gate 1. He was a lot less enamoured with Baldur's Gate 2. So I guess maybe that intense creature design might not be for everyone, but I think I think the core of the fan base would generally agree that that's fundamentally good design. The enemies should feel impactful. Yeah. What do you think? What do you think on all these bits and pieces? Is there anything that I have said that you fundamentally disagree with? Anything that you think I've missed? Because it's been a bit of a briefer ad hoc one, this. Say briefer, it's it's still going to be the other side of an hour, with plenty of ums and ahs and improvising, but that's the nature of this. I was looking to speak to two of my, well, they're friends, but they are also viewers, about this and about the channel, and we were saying that it's designed to be alt tab to, you know. If you are sat here like, you know, riveted like by all this and have just been watching it from start to finish, then fair play, congratulations, you are as nearly as boring as I am. But yeah, I mean, I love it, you know, so if you love it too, great. Anyway, yeah, comments. And also, like, what do you think of level scaling just generally? Are there any good examples of it in games that you can think of, or indeed other ways that this can be handled? I mean, these are not. I've basically used level scaling as a shorthand to mean a very specific thing, and then area scaling is kind of just a catch-all for everything else. You know, are there other ways to do it? What do you think? And also, finally, what on earth was that early 90s PC game which had like the map like Fallout, but you ended up just fighting dragons at the end, and everywhere there was just absolutely, like, it wasn't in the plot that there was a horde of dragons, it was just level scaled. I really can't remember what that was. It was old. Yeah. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.